All right, good evening, everyone. This is going to be a three or a four-part tutorial in which we will essentially be wrapping up working of institutions in political science. However, I would probably begin with the the structure of the ministers, the cabinet per se, who guide and advise the prime minister. For those of you who have already done that in class, may skip this bit and move on to the next tutorial. However, for those of you who have not done this, and I am specifically referring to grade 9 Kanha, you might want to have a look at this first, right? So let us begin. I will quickly share my screen with you all, and we can take it forward from there. Excellent. I'm hoping that by this point of time, you'll be able to see my screen. I will quickly move to the slideshow. Right. All right. So, in the previous discussion, we had essentially discussed how the cabinet of ministers, or rather the council, or rather the prime minister, is appointed by the president. The whole process of the Lok Sabha elections happening, the majority party being declared in the Lok Sabha, then the leader of that majority party is then appointed by the president. He's invited to form the government, the central government, in fact, and then he's also appointed as the prime minister. And once the prime minister is appointed, the prime minister goes about choosing the people who he's going to work with, his team essentially, right? And those are the council of ministers. Now, this council of ministers per se is divided into three main categories, right? And that is what we are going to very broadly look at. So, the first category is the category of ministers who are extremely close, or rather, who work extremely closely with the prime minister. And they are given some of the most important portfolios and responsibilities. Say Mr. Amit Shah, who's the Home Minister, say Mrs. Nirmala Sitaraman, who's the Finance Minister, Mr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, who's the External Affairs Minister, right? Mr. Nitin Gadkari, who's the Highways and the Transport Minister, and so on and so forth, right? So cabinet ministers. So there are about 20 such ministers who form the inner circle of the prime minister, so to speak. Right? They are called as cabinet ministers. So that is the topmost layer of ministers. Then after that, you have the second layer of ministers, which are known as the ministers of state with independent charge, right? So this term that is being used here is extremely important. Independent charge is a very important term. So basically इसका ये मतलब है कि they are also ministers who are a part of the council, but they are given responsibilities for slightly smaller ministries, right? And they are not usually invited to cabinet meetings. That is only for cabinet ministers, right? However, if a special invitation is given to them, they can be a part of cabinet meetings as well. So ministers of state with independent charge of smaller ministries, right? Then last but not the least, we have ministers of state. Do not have any independent charge, since the word independent charge is not associated with this rank, and they are basically attached to major ministries such as, say, external affairs ministry, right, or home ministry, or whatever the case may be. And their work is essentially to advise the cabinet minister uh, for that particular ministry, right? If we were to take an example, right? If you take external affairs ministry, say for example, we have Mr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, who is, say, the cabinet minister for the external affairs ministry, and then assisting him and supporting him in that regard is Mrs. Meenakshi Lekhi, who is also a member of parliament, and she is also the minister of state. I'll just type it here, right? Just to give you some relevance, right? So Meenakshi Lekhi, she is the minister of state for the external affairs ministry, right? Minister, I'm so sorry. Ministry, great. Okay. So here we are, Minister of State for the External Affairs Ministry, right? So this is where it all leads to, right? These are the three different ranks or the three different categories. I'll just quickly get rid of this. Okay. So now we can move on. Excuse me. My screen seems to have hung. I'm not very sure why. Okay, I'll just quickly get. Yeah, I got rid of that problem. Fair enough. I'll just keep it this way because it's easier as well. So again, cabinet ministers come together to have cabinet meetings, right? And that is why a parliamentary democracy is also known as the cabinet form of government, because all the major policy decisions are essentially taken in the cabinet itself, which works as a team, right? Of course, the prime minister is called the first among equals. So the meetings are often led by the honorable prime minister, right? And apart from that, obviously, the cabinet ministers, like the entire cabinet, is supported by a group of very capable officers who form the cabinet secretariat. So your senior IAS officers, even IPS officers for that matter, right? The Indian Administrative Service, Indian Police Service, through which you become the permanent executive in the government, right? You write the UPSC Civil Services examination and you become that. So once you obviously reach that stage of seniority, you can have a chance of serving in the cabinet secretariat, right? And the cabinet secretariat essentially coordinates the working of different ministries, makes sure that the agendas are all aligned, make sure that everyone is on the path, things are being taken care of. And of course, bureaucrats, IAS officers primarily work as policymakers as well. They give policy suggestions, advice to the ministers, background information, research, drafting memos, so on and so forth. Right. So a lot of work is done behind the scenes by IAS officers as well. Right. So that is essentially the cabinet secretariat, which assists the cabinet. Right. And if I were to move on to the powers of the prime minister, of course, the most powerful individual, man or woman in the country, currently a man. So the powers of the prime minister are multiple. The range of or the scope of work is immense. Of course, the first things first, he is the leader of the democratically elected government, right? So there's a big difference between being the head of the state, who is the president, and the head of the democratically elected government, which is the prime minister. So kindly do make a note of that. There's a huge, huge difference, right? And then, of course, once a person becomes a prime minister, he or she gives responsibilities, that is portfolios, to different ministers. You will be the home minister, you'll be the finance minister, you'll be the railways minister, you'll be the education minister, you'll be the human resource development minister, whatever. Yeah, exactly. He's also currently the chairman of the cabinet. As I mentioned before, the cabinet comes together under his guidance. His work is to bring everyone together, everyone on a common platform, a common consensus. Conflict resolution between different ministries is his job as well. There's quite a lot of tasks, quite a lot of work that the prime minister does. Of course, you have already seen our honorable prime minister representing the nation at various summits, including the very recently conducted G20. So he is the official representative of the country, right? He represents the interests of India on a global platform. You would have also seen Mr. Narendra Modi addressing the United Nations General Assembly. So they're all about representing the nation's interests, right? And of course, goes without saying. So the link between the president and the cabinet. So the prime minister, since the president is the head of the nation, so to speak, the prime minister, being responsible for the cabinet, informs the president or communicates to the president any policy discussion that may be happening, or any proposals for creation of any law or legislation that might be in the pipeline. All of it is discussed and is duly submitted to the president for his or her consideration, right? Um then, of course, when I say head, our honorable prime minister is the head of many government programs. Some of the most coveted ones including Niti Aayog, which is a public policy think tank that replaced the Planning Commission, the Ministry of Personnel, Public Grievances and Pensions, which we looked at in our case study at the beginning of this chapter, the Department of Space, Department of Atomic Energy, Nuclear Command Authority, all of them are headed by the prime minister, right? Please try and understand, he is the head. It's not that he's offering any technical expertise, right? So please don't get confused. He's not offering his personal expertise on atomic energy or space, but he's the head, since he's the head of a democratically elected government, right? And he also advises and aids the president on policy matters, right? That's fair. And in the next tutorial, we will definitely be having a look at the president of India. Until then, thank you very much and very good evening to you all. Bye bye.